to the LSAT Unplugged, what I really enjoyed about what I'm enjoying so far about the program is it's execution, right? You're not really spending a whole lot of time in theoretics, right, and reading, which is important. There's an important aspect of learning, but it's like doing. And a lot of my learning is happening on the questions that I get wrong in the review. So yeah, I mean, taking the test in February, I know for 3 of the schools, they'll accept the February test, and then for several of the schools, they'll accept a March test. But of course, that means it'll be a tighter window. So really what I want to, so I guess I'll stop talking and I'll just let you, yeah.
Yeah, sure. My reflection here is that it sounds like you're doing all the right things. You're correct that it's better to apply later with a higher score than earlier with a lower score. So yes, apply when you're ready. And so applying in February, applying in March, totally fine. It used to be the case that March was a bit too late. Things have changed in recent years, so it's totally fine. There may be a little bit less scholarship money available, but if you got a higher LSAT, that can make up for it. So I'm glad you're following the plan. I'm glad you're working with a tutor. I'd love to know any particular challenges you're facing where you could use my support, or anything I can do to help unlock new possibilities for you.
Yeah, I guess before I briefly jump into that, thankfully I don't have to worry about the financial aid piece because the Army's going to cover it. So yeah, so
sweet.
I'm grateful for that. Yeah, but as far as what would be the best? So I know there isn't a silver bullet here, but as the creator of of the course, like kind of like, all right, I've got 3 weeks left until the February exam. I've taken time off of work, which is a blessing. So I'm going to be fully immersed into this. What would you recommend? Like, for example, in the spirit of the Pareto principle, 80-20, like what would you recommend? Hey, all right, hey, spend your time here. But I know that could be hard because you have a condensed one. Well, it's not a condensed, but you have a 1 month plan, and I like it because you're doing a lot of these types of problems in one day. And what it's doing, it's helped me build awareness around these questions, right? So, and I've been doing it. So, for example, in the inference questions, you say do 20 to 30 questions of the MBT, MSS questions, right? Must be true, most strongly supported. So I've been doing them in increments of 5, right? I picked 30, doing increments of 5. But so I guess let me back up. Question 1: what is the best approach as I'm going through this plan to tactically? How do I, like, what's the cue to move on? Because I think week 1 took like the longest. It actually almost took me a little over a week because I didn't feel comfortable going on to the next logic game until I kind of figured out, all right, why this one was wrong. So yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a great question. And the 1 month plan is intense. There's a lot of work to do in that period. So if you felt like you weren't able to keep up with it, that you're falling behind a little bit, 1 week took you 10 days, not 7 days. That's totally fine. I mean, you do have 2 young kids. I get it. So, I mean, to me, it's more about focusing on the things that are going to have the most impact for you, right? So rather than covering some rare question type like parallel reasoning or evaluate the argument, I would focus on the big wins. Must be true, most supported, the inference family, necessary assumptions, flaw questions, strength and weaken, the things that show up consistently, and there's more than one of them per section no matter what. Focus there. Week 1 of the plan is logic games. So if logic games took you a bit longer, that's okay. Logic games are actually the lowest hanging fruit though, so it's worth spending time there. They're more unfamiliar at first, but you can master them. If you want your 80-20 there, focus on the things that show up consistently, ordering and grouping. Don't worry as much about pattern questions. Don't worry as much about curveball questions. Those show up less often. They're also harder. But with 1 month remaining, and really at this point, less than a month remaining, I'd focus on getting ready for test day. So not just accuracy, not just foundation, but also pacing, also endurance, the mechanics of test day, making sure you're doing practice tests in LawHub. Have you been using LawHub? Have you been getting used to the features?
Yeah, I've been using LawHub. However, in that short answer, I've been using LawHub, but I haven't been sure of how to use it to practice.
Okay. Well, there's 2 different ways. I mean, there's taking full-length practice tests in there, which are timed. there's also using self-paced mode. So self-paced mode would be if you're just looking at drill questions by type and jump around a bit, or you're looking to jump into section 3 and do that specifically. Alternatively, you want exam mode if you're going to do it like test day. The weird thing about LawHub, though, is that they haven't really updated it for the 4-section format. So you know that the LSAT now has 3 scored sections, 1 unscored experimental section. You'll see in LawHub, almost all the exams have 2 logical reasoning sections from the olden days, where there were 5 sections, 4 of them were scored. So you've got to play around a little bit and mix and match. I mean, you could just do practice tests with 2 LRs if you wanted to practice with logical reasoning as your experimental section, but you also want to get used to doing 2 logic game sections or 2 reading comp sections. You also want to mess with the ordering of those sections. If doing logic games first and second back to back is your worst nightmare, then do some practice tests like that so you're ready for it. You know, thinking about worst case scenarios, right? Getting ready for that so that you're somewhat prepared if that were to happen on test day. Those are the kinds of things that can actually matter more than knowing how to solve a certain kind of question, because it's the stress of the real thing.
Right. Okay. So basically, so with LawHub, for example, as I'm finishing up day 8, I'm kind of toggling between day 8 and 11, but as I'm finishing up day 8, the must be true, well, the inference questions, right? I don't think there's a way to kind of like individually kind of curating questions in a problem set, right? I'd have to maybe go to a specific test and do all of the must be true, most strongly supported questions within a test. That's probably the most efficient way of like using LawHub, right? Or
exactly, yeah. And a thing about having 1 month remaining, if you're not able to do all the work for a given day on average, maybe you want to do fewer than 20 to 30 and just stick with a couple of exams worth of inference questions, just to make sure that you can keep moving forward.
So basically, if I'm not able, so just stick with like a couple of exams worth for a specific day.
Yeah, for a specific type, question type. Yeah,
right, question type. So for example, like on your necessary assumption questions, right? So I think it's like 15 to 20 up for that. Look at that and just say, all right, I'm going to pull out all the necessary assumption questions from 2 exams.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. Awesome. That's certainly helpful. All right. So you said, the things that you're going to get the most out of: necessary assumption questions, flaw, strength and weaken. Was there anything else that I missed in that list?
Well, I said inference, which you've already been covering.
Yeah. Right. And then for logic games, you said ordering, grouping, and by grouping, all categories of grouping.
All categories of grouping.
Yeah. Awesome. That's certainly helpful.
And these are actually the things that typically appear earlier in my study plans. I have you cover the most important things first. That way, if you never get to the rarer types, not a huge deal.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and what I'm realizing is that, wow, like, the learning on the inference questions are multiplicative in the sense of like, all right, wow, like I'm getting better at kind of chaining conditionals a little bit, and and I can kind of apply that same rigor to logic games and vice versa. So it's been
exactly. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap between different sections, between different question types. And of course, for logical reasoning, it's not just about the question stem. It's also about the method of reasoning that you're encountering. And so you can, if you encounter correlation, causation, reasoning in strengthening questions, then you'll also be well equipped to handle that kind of reasoning, regardless of what question type you see it in.
Awesome. Okay. Definitely. Yeah, I think, I think in terms of so like when would you suggest kind of in the 3-week time span that's remaining to start hitting practice tests? I was thinking next week. What are your thoughts like? Or just
how are you feeling about your foundation in each of the different sections?
I think, so for inference, I'm feeling a little comfortable. For the ordering games, there's a bit that I want to go back to. So not as quite comfortable with ordering. Grouping, somewhat comfortable with in and out, but need to kind of go back to that as well. And in reading comp, I haven't really touched much of reading comp.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be more work to do, but it is important to expose yourself to the pacing and endurance elements of test day. So if you wanted to, you could do one timed exam just to see what it's like and see how ready you're feeling, given that obviously the results on your first practice test are not going to be what they are going to be on your 10th practice test. Getting used to pacing and endurance and just improving your overall accuracy will come with time as you do more of them. So I'd say just do a practice test. Don't put a whole lot of stock in it, but at least just get that experience under your belt and see how it impacts you and see what it uncovers in terms of where else you might want to focus on in terms of time allocation. You could also take the approach of where you hit your 35 minutes, you finish the section, like the time is up, but you could still keep working and just note where time ran out so that you get to complete the entire thing, but you also have a sense of, okay, well, I need to speed up a bit. And then you think about, okay, well, where could I have sped up?
Okay, right. So perhaps I could take a practice test this Saturday, and you may recommend. So what I'm hearing is take it if I take it in the self-paced mode. Perhaps maybe I can give myself 50 minutes, right? And then just kind of note where I ran out of time. Okay, exactly.
And you could also, it's not an all or nothing thing. You don't need to go from drilling questions by type to doing a 4-section exam. You could do one timed section, then 2 timed sections back to back, then 2 back to back, a break, do a third, then do the full 2 break, 2 more.
Okay, right. Okay, so all right.
Because it's grueling, to do 4 sections back to back with just a break in the middle. That's, your brain's gonna be fried at the end. At least mine was with the first several times I did it, really. So it's okay to build up to it.
Okay. So and then you're generally given a 10-minute break in between the second and third section, I believe.
Exactly. You get the 10-minute break between the 2.
And then a 1 minute and 3. And 1 minute transition into each other section.
Exactly. And that's really just a 60-second countdown. So it's not as if that's going to be very relaxing or reduce stress at all. It's more like it's coming. But that 10-minute break is pretty nice, and you can leave the room.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. So this is helpful. I think what I also got out of it is, and it's inherently how the layout and the structure is designed is just really. But if you aren't able to get to, like, let's say the 20 to 30 sections per question type, is kind of limit that to the specific question type across, let's say, 2 sets of 2 exams. So
to just do a handful to start to see the patterns. I mean, if you had a 6-month timeline, I would say do more. But if you're limited by the calendar. You got to do what you got to do, and you do need to get to those timed sections and timed exams sooner rather than later.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll take a practice test on Saturday and just kind of see how that goes. And then, we'll see how that goes. What else? Now the live classes, I've logged on to a couple of live classes, and I found those to be beneficial if I did the problems in advance. But I think in the last couple of classes that I logged into, I was kind of like feeling a little anxiety. It's like, oh man, I got to move through my curriculum. So in one of the classes I abruptly logged out to let me get back to work. So should I, at this point, what's your thought on live classes? I mean, at this stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the live classes are great for community. They're great to be able to ask your questions to the instructor live, to benefit from hearing other people ask their questions. You can also use the chat function there. There is a pre-class study group where students complete the problems together live that will be covered in that same class. So for example, if class is at 8 p.m. Eastern, you can join the study group at 7 p.m. Eastern and complete the questions with others as well as the TA. So that's one option for you. I do recommend completing them before class, but also, I mean, you decide what's best for you that day. You don't need to attend all the live classes for a given week. If you want to go to logic games on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, you can do that. If you want to do reading comp on Mondays only, you could do that. And then they're all recorded. You can catch them later if you need to.
Awesome. Okay. So definitely, I guess, to kind of get, all right. So I'll depending on how I'm feeling that day. And also another takeaway I heard is practice on LawHub just to kind of get used to the interface, so that it won't be like a shock, right? Okay, you've seen it 1,000 times already, right? And it's the exact same interface on the exam.
Exactly. It looks exactly the same, but the books, PDFs don't even come close.
Awesome. Um, yeah, beyond that, do y'all have people who read essays? I mean, I've had, so I'm grateful to have, there's a veterans program. It's called Service to School. They match you up with veterans who've gone to law school to read your essays. But I thought I'd be able to benefit from kind of an outside perspective to kind of read my essays. Is that also available?
Yeah, for sure. I'll send you more info on it. Yeah, I do comprehensive application essay editing.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. I could use yeah, I think I could benefit from that. One of the things that I've been tempted to not do is so for context, I've been studying for this exam for like over a year, right? Minus the starts and stops. I was gonna apply, and also I've written these essays for, they've probably since like 2018, but I put it down, but they've come a long way. So yeah, I would be grateful if you or anybody could kind of take a look at them. So.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to see him.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna keep working. Super grateful to have your resources. Just gotta keep the head down and just keep going. One thing I will say is I purchased one of the cheat sheets, and I was like, wow, this is super helpful. And I'm like, wow, I wish I would have looked at this before, because it, so what happens, for example, like for the inference questions, I'll read all right, how to ID the stamp, right? All right, so now I have a sense of like, and I'm reading that out loud every time I do a new set of inference questions. So I'm kind of ingraining, all right, what should I should be thinking about as I'm approaching inference questions. So I think I'll probably do the same for the necessary assumption questions, the flaw, the strength and weaken questions as well. I noticed you didn't say sufficient assumption as like you don't really see that a whole lot on the.
It consistently shows up, but
Okay.
it's not nearly as common. So if you're looking for the biggest wins with limited time, I would focus way more on necessary assumptions. But sufficient assumptions do come up every single exam, though. So it's worth looking at specifically if you have the time. But if you weren't feeling solid on necessary assumptions, I would say get solid on that before you even look at sufficient assumption.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. All right. Yeah. So yeah, this is great. Anything else that you'd recommend, or?
I would say just get those time practice tests going, time sections, then full length exams, the progression. Know that your first practice test is not where you're ultimately going to end up. There is a learning curve when it comes to the pacing and endurance. Time is a big factor. Fatigue is a big factor. It's not just about accuracy. So a lot of people, they take their first practice test and they get super discouraged by it. I know it's inevitable to look at that number, but just know, okay, well, this is where I'm at right now, but I'm going to be in a very different place when I do practice test number 5 and practice test number 10.
Right. Having that positive growth mindset. And now in terms of like taking the actual test, what I've been doing is, so 5 blank papers of computer paper. Have students said that this is enough, or they found themselves needing more paper, or what has been their kind of tactical approach with that?
Yeah, sure. So it's 5 sheets, which is 10 pages, double-sided. It's more than enough for most people, unless you write really big. So just keep it reasonable, and equivalent to roughly, let's say, 14-point font that you were doing on a computer. Something like that should probably make it more than enough. And keep in mind that you don't need it for all question types. Like for logical reasoning, there are very few question types that I would diagram. For logic games, obviously, you want to use the scratch paper there. For reading comp, you may want to note the main idea, or some people make little summaries, but you don't need much more than that.
Okay. Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed about when practicing on LawHub is so when I would practice on paper, I would write down A, B, C, D, E, and then cross off as I go. And that already is taking up 20, 30 seconds, but but when you're practicing on LawHub, you could just eliminate. They have a feature where you can cross out each respective answer. So
yeah, exactly. Just do it there.
Yeah. So I'm still encouraged. I'm positive, right? I know that many, the LSAT. So what my impression is that, unlike business school, I didn't go to business school, but unlike business school where it's holistic, the LSAT is holistic, but it's but they want the numbers, they want the metrics. So, I mean,
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, there's a big numbers focus on the law school admissions relative to business school. Yeah.
Yeah.
The U.S. News rankings are valued very highly by law schools and admission offices. So they do focus on the numbers. It's LSAT, then GPA, then everything else. So focus on the LSAT, knock that out. And then when you're ready, just reach out to me about the application essay editing, and I'll be glad to help you out with it.
Okay. Yeah. If you could send information over, like I have the essays written, I could just kind of send them, your
for sure.
Way. Yeah. One more thing. I know we got like 6 or 7 minutes left.
I'll go right ahead.
So I thought about just signing up for the March exam just in case, but I don't know if psychologically, if that's a good thing, right? Because are you saying, oh, you're not going to do well in the February exam? So what would you suggest?
It's a good question. Yeah, I actually typically recommend, if you can, signing up for an additional test date just to reduce the stress, because as your target date rolls around, you may start to feel nervous, like everything's riding on it. And so if you already have that next one lined up, just for peace of mind, not that you're necessarily going to use it, but you have it there if you need it, I find it can often reduce the stress a little bit. And it's, of course, it's not fun to sign for something that you don't think you're going to need, especially if you're paying for it. But that being said, though, if it can reduce the stress on test day, then I'm all in favor of it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hey, I've got everything I need to keep running, so I'm gonna keep at it, and then I guess I'll look out for the information for the essays, and but beyond that, thank you again.
Yeah, my pleasure, Val. It's great to have the chance to meet with you now, and I'll be in touch. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.